Creativity management tools for professionals. The focus. The first we're going to do is to see the different steps that characterize a creative workflow. The first one is the focus, the one in which we define our objectives. Then, idea generations. Then, we have a couple of steps where we collect the results of our creative efforts and we trick the ideas to make them stronger, powerful, more relevant before assessing them in order to find the best ones, to take a choice and act. There are tools to solve each and one of these steps of the creative process, and there are also tools to design the entire process. Now, here in this presentation, we are going to define and to present the first one, the focus tool. The focus tool is a tool that we use to make clear what do we want to achieve with our creative effort. This is in fact one of the two weakest parts of a creative process, the other one being idea treatment. It is the weakest part because it is extremely powerful in influencing the rest of the process, and if we fail to define a focus, we may fail the entire process. In this tutorial, we try to understand what is the challenge of defining the focus tool, how do we define objective for a creative session, and how we focus our creative output. So why do we need a focus for a creative session? First of all, we have to direct our creative effort to something that we really need. Secondly, we want to steer our work through all the other phases of the creative processes. Then, we need to avoid unproductive discussions, which are very common in this kind of processes, and we can do that through a clear focus. And finally, a well-defined target yields always a better creative output. What kind of focuses are there? We can define basically two kinds of focuses. One, more generic, is called focus area. This is something that answers the question, what are we talking about? What is the issue that we are addressing here? Within this issue, we might have an objective, something that we want to achieve. This is expressed by a focus purpose, answering the question, what is our purpose? What is our specific goal for this creative session? How can we discern between focus purposes and focus areas? Let's have a few examples. Quality food. That would be a generic issue. We can say this is a focus area. Reducing waste by 50% by 2025 is something that sounds more like an achievement that we want to work for. That would be a focus purpose. How to speed up the service? Well, that could be a focus purpose. Background music is more generic. That would be a focus area. Now I understood that. How to get 50% higher revenue? Yes, that's a focus purpose. Ways of serving wine? That might be interesting. That's a focus area. How do we work to design a focus? The first thing that we do is to explore the background of our discussion, of our creative process. What is our challenge? Can we express this challenge in a short sentence? That would be useful. And what is the core of our challenge? Can we express this core through a few keywords? Are there several aspects coming into this discussion? Are all these aspects equally important? Or can we single out one in particular that we want to work with? All these are relevant questions exploring the background for our focusing work. In general, there are many areas, many things that we want to talk about. And it is interesting to observe that many focus areas can be organized in hierarchies. Let's have an example. If we are going to work with climate challenges, reducing CO2 emissions, um, this is a very broad focus area. Within that one, we can find, for example, two other, among many others, of course, focus areas. One would be industrial production, another one would be public transportation. Now, within these focus areas, again, we can identify several other focus areas at a more detailed level. Construction industry, under industrial production. Steel production would be one kind of industrial production. Now, under public transportation, focus areas could be long distance transportation and short distance transportation. The first one including airplanes and trains, and the other one including taxis in cities and buses. We could go even further and defining another level, even more detailed. Talking about steel production, we could talk about the focus area waste reduction. And talking about short distances within public transportation, we could talk about the level of satisfaction with public transportation of the travelers. So focuses are very often organized in hierarchies. There is more. After having determined our focus level, we have to be aware of it because that will influence the rest of our creative process. Focus purposes also may be organized in hierarchies. At the higher level here, we could talk about how to avoid global temperature to rise more than 2 degrees before 2050. Going downwards in the detail and talking about industrial production, we could have as a purpose to cut emissions from industrial production by 25%. Going even further down, we could focus on construction sites and how to use only electricity-driven machines under construction, etc. Looking at the public transportation, we could talk about doubling the efficiency of this transportation. Then further down, we could focus on the purpose of increasing availability of taxis and buses by 50%. But we could go even further down and focus on how to increase the traveler's satisfaction rate by 100%. If we focus on this purpose at that level, the whole creative process would be based on that level of detail. If we focus at this other level, reducing waste production to zero by 2050, well, the kind of ideas will be at a very different level, much more detailed. So defining the focus purpose is also defining at what level in a hierarchy of focus areas and focus purposes we decide to put our attention. Besides focus hierarchies, we also have focus purpose sequences. Going back to the example of public transportation, we could talk about enhancing the type and variety of offerings for buses, light rail, for example, in a city. And we could talk about purpose related to the coverage of these public transportation offering in a region. We could also talk about the punctuality of these buses or the speed limits allowed for the light rail, or about the refreshments available, or about the customer service. Eventually, we could also talk about the satisfaction rate. So we have to decide where we want to position the attention of our creative process. Now, how can we design a useful focus purpose? First, we have to make sure that the issue is really relevant for the participants to the creative process. Then, we have to look at the core of this issue and define what is our real purpose. Then we can try to see if it is possible to express the focus as a how question. How can we, etc. Being specific, can we specify who is going to do anything about the question? Can we quantify? Can we stretch our ambition level? This is particularly interesting because the more you stretch your ambition level, the more creative energy you create on those who have to achieve this purpose and contribute with their ideas. And then finally, can we set a time frame for achieving this purpose? Now, looking at these points, we can have a good effort in order to define the focus purpose of our creative session. Here we go with a few examples. Within the area of improving car sales, the purpose could be, how can we double the sales of Fiat 500 in the Rome district within 12 months? Here we see that who is we, the ambition level is doubling the sales. We define in which district the sales have to be achieved, and we define the time frame, 1 year only. Within the area of optical MEMS testing, the purpose could be, how can we reduce test time by a factor of 100%? Further, if we look at the area engineering design optimization, we might have several kind of purposes. For example, how can we reduce the amount of steel and concrete in an 8-floor high building? This is a design focused purpose. Or how to cut the construction costs of the foundations by 40%. Or again, how to reduce the waste from the construction site by half. Each of these focuses can give profoundly different actions to be done and ideas to be found during the idea generation session. Now, we said that the focus is very important because it influences the whole creative workflow. Initially, the focusing is important to define your objective. Having defined this objective, the focus during the idea generation session will help to concentrate the generation of these ideas. During the collection of the ideas, it will help to structure this work so we can find families of ideas, etc. As we treat these ideas to make them stronger before being assessed, we can use the focus to make these ideas more relevant. And during the assessment, the focus is used to justify the assessment and the selection of the best ideas. And of course, any choice is supposed to be in harmony with the defined purpose of the whole process. So this is the way in which the focus purpose will influence each and every step of the creative workflow. Now, for those who are interested, there are some literature references here.